It's all about how governments can build trust in AI while fighting the pandemic. Well, we've got with us our speaker, Virginie Martins, ethical AI and SDG expert, member of EU Commission. Well, Virginie, with 15 years of expertise in strategic content and advisory, she has acquired an expertise in AI and innovation towards sustainable development goals with a focus on social and gender bias and ethical concerns. So, firstly, Virginie, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We're so glad to have you. I would just request you to kindly put your mute button, unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this great conference. And the panelists and the panels have been very interesting so far. So within the next 10 minutes, I'm going to try to give you an overview of how governments can build smart AI and trust in AI. And for that, I have prepared a small presentation that I will share with you here. Okay, so you might be able to see my screen now. So as we have seen during the first two panels, the conversation around AI through COVID-19 has been high, and we heard about a lot of things, how AI has improved the reaction of the government through the mapping of a number of cases, through predictive analytics to be better prepared, but also how to, in the future, improve the way governments react and are reactive. At the same time, also, the conversation on AI has pushed us on corners around big topics such as freedoms, public interest, the future of humanity, state responsibility, and data sovereignty. We have seen, therefore, that with COVID-19, AI can be a catalyst for change and really a catalyst to improve the transformation of governments and society as a whole. And therefore, the question is, how can you build trust in AI while fighting for the pandemics? It's very interesting to ask that question, especially because AI triggers a lot of fears. First, because contrary to a computer, the human brain thinking process is not linear, and therefore you need more time as a human, as a person, to collect the information, to process it, and to give it the meaning. And therefore, even though we have a big world of data that is supporting the evolution of cooperation, it does overwhelm the human brains, and therefore there is two reactions, whether you fight or you run. Fighters, as the geeks, the data scientists, the academics, the researchers, are the ones who are pushed because of their responsibilities within the government to work on AI. And you have the average citizen, I would say, who is confronted with a lot of information and feel overwhelmed. And as we have heard also in previous session, fear for their work. And therefore, there is a real need for them to adapt, to change their behaviors and their understanding of the world, which can be a bit overwhelming. Building trust also in AI is specifically very important nowadays when we see all the AI application for governments and AI risk. Here you have a list of the current more talked about application, going from biometrics recognition, contact tracing, which was very high in China and in the Asia bloc, not so much in Europe where it was much more on a voluntary basis. Data collection, which is key. Without data, you cannot really have any AI application for governments. Deepfakes, which have been very high, especially in the US, in trying to attract and to convey a political and a public message through the impersonalization of key figures like Barack Obama. We have also had the drones in Africa to deliver medicine, which is of highly importance when people do not have access to facilities and health services, and also all the frontier technology that we have talked about. We have also seen that it's key to build trust in AI because there are a lot of risks. So the cluster of risk, I would say, over the last 5 years did not change. It remains the same, but the number of threats are blossoming and increasing. It's the case with cyber attacks. I think just in one day during COVID, the Ministry of Health in the United States had faced like 1,000 threats in just one day, and the amount for corporation of the cyber attacks could average the billions by 2024. We have also seen that we need trust in AI, and governments need to be active players because there is a lot of challenges for the public interest, the common interest regarding human rights and fundamental freedoms. Here I have listed a few of them. Anonymity in public spaces. Are we allowed anymore to have anonymity in the public spaces? Freedom of movement. Are we able to freely move, or are we going to move to a standardization where everyone needs to be traced in order to better map the evolution of the pandemics, freedom of speech, whether when you are using deepfakes that can also be compromised, your identity. We are very high in virtual identity where you have access to public services and to government services through a virtual identity, which is the case in India and also in Estonia and Europe. But how do you access such services when someone steals your identity? So again, how the government can build trust and ensure to their citizens that they're going to access all the services available to them, whatever happened with their virtual identity. Privacy, inequality and bias, lack of access, that was mentioned also today, and therefore exclusion of certain population, including elders, women, and youth, which are very crucial for an inclusive society and for governments to have a social impact on their citizens. Also, lack of accountability sometimes. Where is the accountability stand within the designers, the coders, the ministry, the government, the state, lack of transparency, and also all the enforcing and unknown consequences. That's where trust is important, and trust has been the ethical AI and responsible AI has been the first vector of trust throughout the evolution of AI. Here, I wanted to give you a clear mapping of the different stage of ethical AI. So you have AI in general, which is just pure research on AI and innovation. When you try to have a framework that guarantees the right of citizens, but also some basic safeguards to have quality data and to be able to have an impact, you talk about ethical and responsible AI. And you have a narrower scope of AI application within this ethical and responsible AI, which is AI for good, when AI applications are really developed towards SDGs, development goals, and all social impact policies. I'm looking at the time because I know I have a few more minutes. So here I also wanted you to have a few key dates when we talk about ethical and responsible AI. Again, that is the first vehicle to be trust within governments. Asimov laws of robotics, but also the UN Innovation Principle that has been signed by Microsoft, other private corporations and governments in alliance with a collaborative process and with a lot of stakeholders. And also be aware that from 2017 to today, there is a lot and a multiplication of internal governance procedure within governments and within organizations, and all those different, I would say, leverage does strengthen the build and the trust that we have in AI from a citizen perspective. So now, concretely, how governments can build trust in AI while fighting for the pandemic? Here, through best practices and current business practice nowadays, some that has been already mentioned this morning. I think a clear stewardship. It always comes from the top, even though you want to have a culture of AI. It's come from leadership. What are you trying to achieve as a government? What is your strategy? What is the social impact you want to have? And try to develop applications that are just not for safety and security, but also for social and economic progress and inclusion. A fit for purpose analysis is very key. That was also mentioned by the moderator in the previous panel. We talk a lot about investing, but the cost of investment for a public actor is very high because you have to implement in the change management. You also have to in the software, in the maintaining of the software, in the upgrading of the software, in capacity building, and all those things as a cost. So be prepared to also sometimes say, no, I'm not able to develop that. I don't have the investment capacity, but I might use data from another ministry and therefore trying to build smart partnership. Something also you want to be very aware in fit for purpose analysis is that we don't have so much measurement on the real social impact of AI application. Yes, it's good for predictive analytics and to increase your data-driven decision-making process, but for the social impact per se towards citizens and your global policies, it's not done that much, and maybe it's an area where governments should invest more. Try also to have diversity. We need diversity. We need to have a society that is diverse from region, but also within a country. Who are you representing and who are you trying to involve? But it's not enough. Try also to push the boundaries of your thinking process and try to push the limit of the possible and what you think is acceptable sometimes, and try to play a bit around that creativity bubble. Smart partnership, I already mentioned that. Governance, a clear governance. So different leverage here are clear guidelines within your corporation and within your governments with internal policies and handbooks. Try to make a distinction between the core requirements when it comes with managing data and specific requirements depending on the applications. Try also to predict what you will do in case of ethical breaches or ethical doubts. and always put your citizen in the core of the process. What are we trying to achieve as a government for the beneficiaries, and communicate a lot about it, reassure people, invest in capacity building, and really try to coordinate your internal regulation with your national regulation, with your regional regulation, and with the international standards that are being developed. And I encourage you for that, and especially for governments to look at the UN Principle for Development that has been updated in 2019 and signed by a lot of organizations. And I think it's a very nice way for you to be aligned with what is happening and have a greater impact for your organization and governments. Thank you. I think I'm just on time, and that's what I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you so much for that, Virginie, for joining us on the show today. And it was great viewing it live from you. Thank you so much.